Assistant Commissioner Gauvin, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, Rosemary.
Obviously, we have a lot to talk about. I want to start with the fact that the RCMP, that you guys chose to come out on a holiday Monday to say very publicly that you had evidence linking Indian government agents to homicides and other acts of violence in Canada, and that there was a serious threat to public safety. Was that threat imminent, and was it thwarted?
So I'll start by saying that our public announcement was not planned to happen specifically on Thanksgiving holiday. I mean, we've been conducting investigations for some time where we uncovered these serious, significant public safety threats. And in the week leading up to our public announcement, I mean, there were a number of efforts that were undertaken, for example, where we tried to meet with our Indian law enforcement counterparts to discuss the violent extremism issue in India and Canada, as well as presenting evidence that we uncovered through our investigations. But those attempts were unsuccessful. And of course, as we talked about on Monday, there was the meeting on October 12th between senior government officials of Canada and India, which did not result in a satisfactory outcome. And therefore, that led us to coming out publicly with our statement and also with the actions that were undertaken on the diplomatic side.
And so just so I understand, did that decision to come out publicly on Monday, unplanned decision, did it prevent a crime from happening, a homicide or something else from happening? Did it stop that from happening?
No, there was no imminent threat coinciding with this public announcement. We were planning this proactive approach for some time, but it's just the events leading up last week, and then also following the October 12th meeting, there was reporting in the Indian media that was false, and we also wanted to correct the record.
Got it. What can you tell us about, and I realize you might be limited here, about the state of the investigation now? Obviously, we've seen Indian diplomats be expelled from the country, but my understanding is that there are all sorts of different networks of people at play here, everything from gangs to proxies. So I'm just wondering, where is the state of that investigation in terms of undoing that network?
So the investigations very much continue. As mentioned on Monday, we have a national team that is in place. It's a multidisciplinary team that is tasked with investigating and coordinating efforts to disrupt this threat. So those investigations continue, and which may lead to charges in the various cases.
It's my understanding that it is possible that because of that decision on Monday, that some of the people that were part of that network might have fled the country. Do you know whether that is true? And would that be a problem for the RCMP to have potential criminals actually just go back to India or leave Canada?
So the objective here is to disrupt the threat and to disrupt the network. Any type of disruption, as long as it's in line with our objectives of stopping the violence and ensuring that the Canadian public and individuals living in Canada are protected, for us it is a positive. Our investigations will however continue, and we will not stop our efforts until we're satisfied that that threat has been mitigated.
We've obviously been talking a lot about those people who have, people have been killed, but also the targeted for killings. But there's other crimes that have happened as well, extortion, coercion. What can you tell me about those threats and how, and what you've uncovered there in terms of how it's being done?
Right. So what we've uncovered through our investigations, and And let me highlight that our investigations have been continuous, comprehensive, and conducted in accordance with the highest standards of law enforcement. And what we've uncovered is there's been different coercive tactics. For example, leveraging the issuance of Indian visas, threatening individuals here in Canada, threatening their lives, threatening their safety, giving them assurances that they would receive protection if they worked with the agents of the government of India, threatening their families in India. So there was a variety of coercion tactics that were employed by Indian diplomats, consular officials, their proxies, people in the community that were either coerced or voluntarily collaborated with the agents of the government of India.
Were there people who were paid by the Indian government? Do we know to engage in some of these activities?
Well, because the investigations are ongoing, I won't be able to provide that level of detail.
You have asked the Sikh community to speak out as the investigation continues. Obviously, many people feel unsafe. What is your message to them about how to help or how to cooperate?
I want to reassure the public and the communities specifically that there's no current imminent threat to their safety and security, but we ask them to remain vigilant. As we remain vigilant and maintain awareness on possible threats, and we continue to work with our domestic and international partners in identifying those threats and responding to them. We encourage them absolutely to contact us and report incidents where they would have been subjected to transnational repression, intimidation, threats, and whatnot. Even as victims, as witnesses, any type of information will assist us in advancing our investigations and our efforts in disrupting this threat activity.
Were you surprised by how extensive the network is and how closely connected it is to the Indian government?
It is absolutely an extraordinary and outrageous situation, one that is unprecedented here in Canada. So I would say yes to your question.
Yes. There is some suggestion that India may have been involved in conservative leadership campaigns. I'm wondering whether you have looked into that, if that's part of an investigation?
Yeah, so as mentioned during the press conference on Monday, we've uncovered 4 major issues throughout our investigations, and interference in government and democratic processes is one of those issues. But because these investigations are ongoing, I can't provide any further details at this time.
Is it fair to say that the Conservative leadership race, as identified by other agencies and the NSICOP report in particular, that the Conservative leadership races are part of that investigation, that you are looking at those?
We have investigations on interference in democratic processes, but I am not at liberty to discuss those specific matters at this time.
Okay. Assistant Commissioner Gauvin, I know it's unusual for you to be talking at all, so I really appreciate you bringing more information to Canadians. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Those allegations by the RCMP, very familiar to my next guest. Moninder Singh is a Sikh activist from BC, and he's been warned multiple times by the Canadian government that he faces an imminent risk of assassination. The government did not say who was behind it. Moninder joins us this morning from Ottawa. Nice to see you in the same town as me this time, Moninder. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You've been warned, as I said, multiple times about threats against your life. When this sort of all became very public last week, what went through your mind?
I think some of the things that were captured through the RCMP, that this is a very extraordinary, outrageous, unprecedented, those are all terms I think the Sikh community would use as well. We have known for over 40 years that this type of interference is happening. So it wasn't a shock per se, But the level of interference, the depth of it, I think those are all very shocking to the rest of Canada and Canadians in general. So like even when you get these duty to warns, they're very limited in scope as to what you're actually provided. We hear that as in there's no imminent threat at the moment to the Sikh community, yet we have just a week ago the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, saying that there is still a threat, a very real threat to Sikh leadership in Canada for assassination. And we have repeatedly and still will continue to go back to freezing all intelligence sharing agreements and security agreements with India, so more violence can't be carried out in Canada. And a public inquiry into India and this wave of violence and extortion that they've committed in Canada, so we can actually understand how deep this problem actually is in Canada right now.
I wonder whether you think, though, the fact that it is now public in a way that it wasn't to the rest of the country, certainly before, whether that, in fact, makes you safer, or do you think nothing has changed, that the people behind these threats will not be scared by the fact that we're talking about it and that people are watching more closely?
I think they're not going to be deterred. I think they're going to continue to come to places like Canada, the UK, Australia, and basically the Five Eyes countries where Sikhs have a significant diaspora, and a diaspora that's very politically active, especially in countries like Canada. Yeah. And that political activism is not just within Canada, it's also back home in Punjab where human rights violations occur, extrajudicial murder, genocide, and our sovereignty movement for Khalistan. I think all of those are factors why the Indian government will kind of continue unabated by this, but we should make no mistake, through the Commission on Foreign Interference that's continuing to happen right now and just kind of came to a conclusion, that democratic processes, institutions in this country, elections, all the way from the leadership races in various political parties to nominations to the general election, all are being undermined, and Canada's sovereignty is being undermined. So it's not just an issue, I think, for Sikhs in Canada. This is actually an issue for all of Canada and all of Canadians. So I don't think safety is paramount for our community right now. It's actually staying the course and ensuring that people in Canada have their charter rights and their rights to freedom of expression and speech, that those aren't violated. So I think there isn't a higher level of safety, but we're not deterred right now by what we need to do.
Canada expelled 6 diplomats, and also I think we got a lot of detail too about Moninder, about the attempts the Canadian government and intelligence agencies made to try and get India to cooperate, to look at the evidence, to admit that there were these connections. Were you surprised that there was no cooperation from India and no admission about any of these allegations?
I think I would be surprised if they actually did cooperate. They have consistently, under the Modi regime since 2014, played at an international level that they are untouchable. They have impunity and immunity. They actually move around in countries with foreign interference. That's kind of coming to light now in the UK and the United States with the attempt on Mr. Gurpatwant Pannun, many other Sikh leaders in Canada that were supposed to be assassinated. So I think they needed something to kind of show them that they aren't going to be completely let off the hook by countries right now. So I think they themselves are working in the processes that India has worked in for decades, which is basically these clandestine activities, using their consulates as a guise for diplomatic cover for intelligence agents that come here, coerce people, threaten them. These are Canadian citizens, these are business owners, these are average people that are being extorted, their houses are being shot at, their houses and buildings are being burnt down. There's a lot going on, and it's all happening in Canada to Canadians. I think that's why every Canadian should be very worried that China and Russia have been treated as hostile actors. They've been termed as hostile states. And we treat India with padded gloves, and that has to change. Otherwise, there's nothing that's going to get them to cooperate until they actually feel a bit of that brunt of pressure from the international community.
Just 30 seconds, Moninder, but you are, in spite of all of these concerns and warnings about your own safety, you are still speaking out. Why?
I think if we stopped, it would be, that's what they want. That's their victory at the end of the day, is to get people to stop speaking out, to stop advocating for human rights, for sovereignty, for self-respect at the end of the day. So we can't let that happen. I lost a good friend of mine, Mr. Nijjar, to this violence. I owe it to his legacy as well to continue that fight. But overall, I think we can't allow India to come into Canada, undermine our institutions, the sovereignty of this country, and it would really just take away from what this country is supposed to be, where those freedoms are actually what make this country something that's very positive for all of us, and we can't allow India to take that away from us.
Moninder Singh, thank you for making the time for me this morning. Good to see you again, sir.
Thank you.